Frontline Gaming presents 40K Stat Center with your hosts, Val Heffelfinger and the Falcon.
The last time Americans treated us this badly on our own soil, we burned down the White House. We swing by the Canhammer team tournament to survey the damage.
Meanwhile, in Belgium, they were serving up Team 40K with a side of frites. Check out the Belgian Team Championships to see who managed to outdraw their opponents.
What do you know? Dark Angels bring the dank in Colorado.
Excellent read, Paul. Finally, we find a creative way to talk about all the Iron Hands winners from last weekend. That's right, folks. This is Stat Center. Oh, I really love that new element. Pete wrote it into the last show, guys. What do you think? I literally almost said Sports Center there, and we're probably going to get a cease and desist letter.
Monday night.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that.
No, definitely not. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't noticed, the Falcon has flown the coop. Not sure if Falcons live in coops, but he's not here. So this is when Pete's away, quality control's out the window. So today we brought the most talented extemporaneous talkers in 40K. Of course, the first one on the docket would be my main man, the Paul Murphy.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And then the unsung hero of the Las Vegas Open, the man behind all of that information being fed to you on our stream. He was perhaps the first guerrilla table boss in 40K history, the Telemundo of Warhammer streaming, Tony, Sir Panda Pants. Welcome to the show, sir.
Val, thanks for having me. You know, only you could make a job like that sound so glorious.
Well, there've already been a lot of love-in episodes about just how much we care for one another after going through the crucible that was streaming the Las Vegas Open. So we don't have to do that here today. But
being birthed into this world.
That's right. Paul Murphy has a tattoo of Stat Center now on his butt. He's very committed. It's fantastic. Yeah, it was wonderful. And in sort of the spirit of that vibe of togetherness and you know, brotherhood, this will be the first Circle Jerk episode in Stat Center history. Now, not to be too harsh, but I did create this show with Peter in an effort to not just have talking heads trying to guess at what happened at various tournaments that have been occurring. But this is exactly what we're going to do this week. I didn't get many interviews together. We have one very special one after the team tournament coverage. But guys, are you ready to kick it old school and just make up some stuff about what people were thinking when they took what they took?
I thought that was my job.
I mean, I would love to dip my foray into this because I've gotten a lot of questions just by posting these. And guys, we're just going to wing it. I have no idea. I'm just going to tell you anything.
See, he's just going to say, I mean, he is a panda with pants on. So, you know, your mileage may vary. We're going to see how this goes. Any last words before we bump this and we're off to the races, guys?
How'd Iron Hands do?
Tournament news is made possible by BestCoastPairings.com. Download the BCP TO app to organize events for just about any tabletop game system. Download the player app to easily find and participate in events from around the world. Subscribe to BCP for as little as $5 a month to support the team and unlock additional features. Available for iOS and Android. BestCoastPairings.com. Competitive events easier.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to kick it off with coverage of what turned out to be one of the most hilarious one-sided drubbings, I think, that has ever happened. That's right. We're talking about the Canhammer team tournament. Once upon a time, a delightful springtime romp out here in southwestern Ontario. Subsequently moved to southeastern Ontario in the dead of winter. This did not dissuade a certain crew of evil Americans from descending upon this tournament, hosted as Capital City Bloodbath is, at the EY Center right across the street from the airport. Which Americans showed up for this one, Panda Pants?
That would be everyone from the Charity Hammer team.
That's correct. Such luminaries on it include, I don't know, Andrew Gagno, We had Colin Sherman. We had Nick Nanavati. We had John Lennon. And, just because that wasn't enough, they decided, hey, Mr. Siegler, why don't you hop in this clown car of nightmares and come along with us?
See, that's what happens. Americans roll up, they bring a flag, but bring some unconventional list. I mean, what was the mission format for the tournament?
So this tournament was running, and by the way, it was about 20 teams, so actually actually larger than that. They may have actually, I know they were pushing for 26 or 28 teams. They were running the ETC format, which they do. This is originally started as sort of a practice tournament for Team Canada, and they got some practice this time. So yeah, it was ETC format. It was, I believe, 6 rounds. And the teams were each, however, 5 people on each team instead of 8, as it would be in the actual ETC. And in a team tournament, of course, you're facing off against teams. You're going through a bit of a pairing scenario to figure out what your matchups are round to round.
Leave it to Florida to come up with the Miami Heat of 40K teams. This is ridiculous.
It is the Harlem Globetrotters, and they did go up against a lot of the Washington Generals out there. But yeah, let's maybe break down a couple of these lists, because I think they are representative of sort of the most recent Psychic Awakening post. Actually, I think it wasn't even, I'm not even sure if the Grey Knights one was in effect here. But yeah, Paul, did any of these lists particularly jump out of you? The meme list of the winter so far, the Ridge Runner Gene Stealer cult list did make an appearance. John Lennon.
Yeah, that's having a bit of a sweetheart tale with the Ridge Runners coming out of basically ultimate obscurity and then actually doing pretty well at some notable tournaments, getting their debut, I think, probably at the Las Vegas Open. But the one that sticks out the most to me, I think of the maybe novelty is a bad word, but the Sisters of Battle list run by Andrew Gagnon.
That's right, and I believe similar archetype to what he was running also at the Las Vegas Open. This one is. Just to refresh everyone out there, it's a battalion of Sisters of Battle. So you've got 3 units of Battle Sisters. Looks to be about 10 in each one of those units. You've got an Elite Imagifier, and you got 3 units of Seraphim with 4 Hand Flamers in each. They are of all of the Valor's Heart, and then you have a Vanguard detachment also.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This doesn't take anything away from the list, though. This list is supported by Blood Angels, which they are the backbone of the Imperium. But we're running close to 20 Sanguinary Guard, 19 to be specific, and then Mephiston, who is just an all-around champion.
That's right, and actually, this just triggered my memory. I do believe this part is a shift away from what he was originally pairing with the Sisters. He was originally pairing, I do believe, some Space Marine artillery, as well as a character dread. So this one it just goes with the beady uppy types of things. Now, you love your Sanguinary Guard. How do you think they pair with the types of Sisters units that are being presented here?
Well, what's missing from the Sisters of Battle side that I think you would see in a mono faction list are things like the Exorcist. So what the Sanguinary Guard allow you to do is support all the shenanigans, the miracle points and the re-rolling wounds and whatnot that the Zephyrim from the Sisters of Battle side can do with these hard-hitting 2+ armor save guys that can move the same speed. So you're able to put a lot of pressure on your opponent, but you're giving up a lot of the shooting. But I think you make up for it with some additional synergies of adding in layers of things, with the stratagems that the Blood Angels can burn to almost recycle or put their troops anywhere, their infantry anywhere.
I also think it's pretty helpful as a defense to just have 50 bodies of a mobile screen if you need to. The Sisters of Valor's Heart can actually take some serious punishment if they're put in cover. If you have no AP, that's 2 up saves.
Shifting gears over to Colin Sherman's list, and he has gone into detail about how destructive he feels that the Eldar are. That's a hard thing to say. Post-Psychic Awakening. Essentially, they got masterful shots and expert crafters, so they're super, super efficient. Regardless, he's talked about the list at length on his show, Best in Faction podcast. He has described this as if Space Marines didn't exist, the sort of shooty Craft Worlds Eldar type list that he's running here would be the tyrannical list of 40K. What do you guys think of the damage output and potential ability of this? We're running three Crimson Hunter Exarchs with the Masters of Concealment and Expert Crafters. We're running a Spearhead detachment with 3 Night Spinners and 9 Vibro Cannons, also with Expert Crafters and Masterful Shots. And then you just have a battalion detachment, again, with the Expert Crafters and Masterful Shots. And that one's got 3 units of Rangers. Haven't seen those guys in a while. And 2 Wraith Lords.
Other than his just fuel for command points in the battalion, everything here is spitting out multiple damage, which is really nice. The Night Spinners are things that they see fringe play, but they do indirect shots damage too. I mean, it can be incredibly withering to be on the other side of that. It's like a souped up Thunderfire cannon for anybody out there who might not be aware.
Yeah, Night Spinners are strength 7, they're AP 0, they're damage 2. However, on a 6 to wound, they're -4, and with Masterful Shots are ignoring cover already. So it's quality output.
Yeah, and 2d6 shots each time?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Crimson Hunter Exarchs are a little bit of old tech, but they can be lots of different places. You can get angles of fire on people. It's very difficult to outmaneuver them and outmaneuver the other powerful shots he has in his army.
And I love that. You can't forget the 9 Vibro Cannons. So they're heavy D3, strength 7, -1, 2 damage, flat 2 damage. And for each one that has already been fired at the same target this phase, you improve the AP of the weapon by 1 to a maximum of 3, and adding 1 to the wound rolls to a maximum of 2. So you can get these are strength 7 at a +2 to wound and -3.
Yes. And it's for each Vibro Cannon, right? So like that means that
that's been fired. It doesn't have to hit. It doesn't have to wound.
Doesn't
it's
have to
just
be
been
from the
fired.
same group of 3. They split? I assume actually they split off in other units when they're deployed.
They do actually because they're support weapons.
Yeah. So the ridiculousness of Vibro Cannons was sort of a rumor. I feel like people were talking about Vibro Cannons in maybe December or November.
I think I saw it at least once in December. Alex Ramsey.
Right. Paul, have you? You once tried to warn me of the oncoming Shredder meta. What do you think about Vibro Cannons? I mean, greater or worse than like Orc Smasher guns?
I think this is one of those things that exist in the environment of a team tournament more than it would be a singles competition. I think that with the list makeup with this particular one, it's a bit of a hot potato. No one wants to face this. No one is probably geared up to face this.
Certainly not turn 2. This is a go first, win first kind of list.
Yeah, I think this is so the Vibro Cannon meta. I wouldn't necessarily plan for it. I think Eldar people are familiar with their tricks, but maybe this is exactly what is needed to mix it up a little bit. I mean, the Night Spinners. That's been a known quantity. I said on the fringe. Nobody's expecting the Vibro Cannons. I don't know that you're going to see it, but it isn't bad.
That ain't bad. And then finally, like I said, just this is sort of like a little kicker, a little toss in. World champion, Mr. Richard Siegler, running a little chestnut list of his own, a throwback to his glory days, known as September. He's running his almost his OG Tau list, some very minor variations. This one has a battalion, so he's running some breachers in there. He's got a Cold Star Commander with 4 fusions instead of 3 enforcers. But then he's got the 3 Riptides and as many drones as he can cram in there. Not a lot to talk about. I mean, the role this must play, obviously, in an ETC format is just that sort of defender grinder list, I would suspect, because, I mean, that's what he was doing with it for the second half of the season.
No, he certainly coined this list and is known for his power, and he knows the ins and outs of it. So a dangerous player with any list, as we've seen, but I would say especially with this one.
Oh, yes. The amount of reps he has with this list is easily in the hundreds.
So I could see, and this is where we're going to get a little circle jerky, because we're going to guess at what all these lists did. But, as a pretty layman dude, I can see, obviously this list and probably maybe even the Sisters list as the sort of defender anvil type lists that are going to grind out wins if they need to. I'm going to get into whether they were grinding anything in a second. But where do you think, and obviously you've got a very traditional Alpha Strike, heavy, blow them off the board, light terrain table type list like the Eldari one. And then there's the Tyranids list. Where do you think the Tyranids list sort of fit into this? Where they just like, whatever, John, you can bring your Tyranids. We're just having fun.
It's Tyranids and G-Slayer cult, so this has the Ridge Runners in it. So there, it can be lots of different places. You have a decent amount of firepower, and you've got the Swarm Lord, which allows you to put a lot of pressure on people. So I mean, I think if there's a theme between at least 3 of these lists, it is to make it very difficult for people to settle in and prepare to kind of throw people on their back foot in the early couple of turns.
Right on. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think, Panda Pants? Where do the G-Stealer cults and the Nids fit in?
It's really going to depend on what the other team brought, because this could easily be a first out list just to say, hey, this is what we got, and see if anybody has anything to deal with it. But there's also a list of this list that does not want to see. Surprisingly, it's not what you think. It's surprisingly good against a lot of mech, against a lot of flyers. It can take care of itself in that environment. So, yeah, I'd throw it out just to see if the other team even thought they could deal with it.
All right, so we've mentioned that this team had a bit of a lulzy run throughout the event, and in fact they did. I believe they finished the event with 100 more battle points than anyone else. They got things going in the first round against Wargame Sherbrooke with a 98-2 win. Way to go with that 2 points there, Wargame Sherbrooke. And then we had Charity Hammer against the Fighting Cephalopods, a great group of guys. They went down swinging 100-0. And then the next round, we've got this is it. This is the title match, guys. This is probably the best team that Canada was running this year. Charity Hammer versus Canhammer. Canhammer gets on the board, but it's a Charity Hammer win, 72-28. Now, I'm sure Nick Nanavati cannot see at this point because we're going overnight now. Somehow they all make it the next day because they don't need a 5th player. Charity Hammer takes on 40K Unfiltered. Some of my homies on that team for sure. 40K Unfiltered was filtered 93-7. And then finally, rounding it all out, we've got Charity Hammer versus Team Rejects. Also a great group of guys. However, they go down 81-19. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. That is nuts. That is a drubbing.
Look, the skill of these players, you got to say that, right? But these lists, they have the ability to be offensive and defensive. Like you're just talking about being able to audible into a 2+ save. What is their lowest toughness, lowest armor save list still has access to things like lightning fast reactions. I mean, they can play either side of the table, which is, I think, probably helps shine out. And you also mentioned there were, the 20-something teams. That's still 100-something people playing.
Oh yeah,
40K that weekend. But looking over some of the list, I don't see that type of duality in some of the choices that some of these teams brought.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, this is a pretty A team, and I'm glad at least that the team that gave them the hardest run for their money was probably members of Team Canada. So that's great. I mean, this literally is like alternate timeline Team America. So, and it does have some actual players from Team America on it as well. So it was one heck of a dream team. I'm glad they made the trip up. Nick Nanavati went to Ottawa in February, which is like going to the Arctic in February without a jacket because he lives in Florida now. So way to go, Nick.
Another interesting thing about these lists is that these don't seem to be tailored for the mission format. The missions are not ITC missions that a lot of these lists have been popularized in. They just seem to be doing well no matter what the objectives are.
Yeah, I mean, well, even something, though, like the Vibro Cannon list, I mean, it would probably be vulnerable to a lot of ITC secondaries that it maybe doesn't worry about as much in an ETC format.
I will say Colin's list is the most unconventional that I've seen. I've not seen this list perform, and take a number 1 slot at a podium before. It could be just because I'm sleeping on it. But, I think that would be probably the longest shot. But he seemed to do really well with it, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I mean, to beat this drum just a little bit more, sometimes this is almost mirrored in the Orc Smash-A-Gun thing, how it took a while to gain traction in America because I think of ITC. And eventually the power, I think, of the list overcame just the fact that, hey, oh my gosh, I should give up secondary sometimes.
Yeah. Or even primary with Killmore if you start getting on a roll with all those individual things. And just to correct the record, because Colin Sherman maybe tunes in every now and again, I'm pretty sure you won a GT with one of these just in the late fall, like just before Christmas.
It could be. I mean, it just takes a slight bit of luck in your whatever your worst matchup is, and this list will stomp into the ground because you've got so much reliable 2-damage weaponry.
Oh yeah, it's
reliable, sometimes high AP multiple damage weaponry.
Yeah, it's got all the tools out of line of sight, shooting too. It's nasty. So with that all said, Charity Hammer, not too charitable on its first trip north, and perhaps. Maybe they'll come back for
unless you giving out whoopings, seemingly for free.
That's right. They maybe they bought their opponent's beer. Who knows? We'll have to find out by tuning into BiffPod. So you heard what we said, but you can also go down to BiffPod. I'm pretty sure they released just today a nice episode with John Lennon, Nick Nanavati, and Mr. Richard Siegler talking about their experience with Colin on BiffPod. So without further ado, we're going to move on to the next event.
Tournament news.
This is Colin.
This is Mitch.
This is Chuck.
And we're from the Best in Faction podcast. And you're listening to 40K Stat Center, where one host has a really strange nickname and the other one's called the Falcon.
We now turn our attention to Europe, specifically Belgium. Yes, that's right, the seat of the European Union itself. The land of wheat beer and frites. Did you know, guys, that French fries come from Belgium?
Makes sense.
Does it,
sure,
though?
Why not?
Does it, though? Because literally they only, literally every single thing that they serve is served with French fries. And I appreciate it, at least, some mayonnaise. It's also the land of Tom Adriani, who's leading up a portion of the WTC, and he has been leading the charge at organizing a sort of pre-WTC, formerly ETC, team tournament. This one is, of course, using the WTC format. I think we said ETC all the way through the previous segment. We're going to roll with it, regardless. Don't know if you guys know. Listen to Chapter Tactics last week. Turns out they broke up. Regardless, Tom has been helping organize or leading the charge on this event in Belgium. It attracts a lot of players from the national teams in England, France. I believe they've got definitely Poland who manage a podium finish here. Unsurprisingly, the Poles are very good at this Warhammer stuff. So they all come out. This one was a 6-person team rather than 5, so they pared it down from the 8-person team that usually played in WTC format. And then they had at her. After 5 rounds, I do believe, we had 2 teams on 8 battle points. In the team format, normally you get 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, no points for a loss. So we had 2 teams on 8 points. One, the England Lions, and the other, the representatives from Poland, simply named Poland, both on 8 points, which meant 3 wins and 2 draws. And I do believe perhaps they should have recalibrated what a draw was, maybe, after the dropping of 2 teams from the normal format. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician.
Caring about points is more of a Western concept.
Well, I actually really enjoy this because the first tiebreaker on this battle points, the first tiebreaker is actually win-loss in this tournament, not battle points, which was cool. Because actually the third place team is a Team England team. Third place, by the way, managed with 1 win, 3 draws, and 1 loss. So reach for those stars, guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where they were still calculating the scores of the point differential, what might have been for a extra people on the team, accounting for maybe a potential extra scores. Maybe
I don't know.
Yeah, what was the spread? 20 points was a tie.
It would be something like that. Maybe it was 10. I don't know. Look, this is the Circle Jerk episode, guys. Just say something with conviction, and that's the truth.
Grey Knights. The Grey Knights. You're going to see. I mean, how cool is it we get to talk about them legitimately going forward? I mean, this has been a completely unrepresented faction, only talked about in fantasy and the things that hopes and dreams are made of.
That's right.
And now people are actually playing them.
Well, there was the Eric Lathuris Dream Run. We're never going to forget it. Eric Lathuris forever. Of course, in Australia, he did win a GT. But you're right. The captain,
I
the
like to
dread.
point out also a myth that happened one time. No one can verify.
It was on stream. I watched it.
Nothing. I never saw it.
It didn't
Apparently,
happen.
Astral Aim and Land Raiders, man. This is what doesn't
show
stick
up-
down in Australia.
You show up with your plaster of Paris large foot, and I'm just supposed to believe that happened. Bush.
So
No, of course, no. I'm not going to diminish his win, but even that was, I think, lightning in a bottle kind
Sure,
of thing.
absolutely.
We're now going to be able to actually talk about them.
yes, and the reason why Paul Murphy has created this segue is because the dread captain Josh Roberts, who is leading the England Lions and actually wound up winning the event. He was running Grey Knights. I'm going to have to assume, obviously, Psychic Awakening is in play for the Belgian team championships. Let's have a look here. See, he's running a double battalion, which is pretty cool. He's running a total of 6 strike squads. Very cool. Where are the points here? We got an apothecary, and there's the points. We got 19 paladins, or maybe the full 20.
It's 19, yeah.
So there you go. It's a double paladin. He went with the baker. He went with a full baker here.
The amount of Nemesis warding staves, pretty interesting here. I think I would have expected to see more, a little bit of more offense, but I guess you don't need it when you can pump out 20-something mortal wounds a turn.
Right, exactly. And the amount of Stormbolter shots is... I really would have gone more with Falchions, but he seems to go with Halberds on the strike squads.
Yeah, this is sort of interesting. I've seen the staves being used on, Paragons or Justicars just to give, one guy who can tank with the invuln that they provide. But yeah, I haven't seen them out in such force before.
The halberds, I mean, of course, it's impossible to know inside the mind of the player, but the halberds could be a modeling choice on the strike squads. I don't consider them necessarily throwaway models because of that, but with one wound and the fragility of just how do you say it? With just the paper nature of a 3+ armor save, they are kind of like dump and pump figures.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking elsewhere in the list here for some wrinkles versus what Lawrence had a good showing with the other weekend. We've got, 6 characters on the field. So we've got the Brother Captain, Grandmaster Voldus, of course. I think he'll be a pretty standard choice. A Chaplain, a Librarian, and the Brotherhood Ancient here would be sort of an interesting add. Nothing listing whether or not he was taking the Relic banner, but D6 Smites ain't what it used to be. I wonder what he's using. He's also got Warp Shaping on the Brotherhood Ancient, so maybe he's just chilling in the back zone with him. Next up, we got Tom Higginbottom. He's not running an orc list like the one that we described earlier. He's got more of a boys-heavy presence and Gretchen. So what do we got here? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units of boys. Almost maxed out on all of those. And then we've got, looks like 75 Gretchen in 3 units, triple battalion. It's just a whole lot of, this is a infantry body carpet.
75 Gretchen. That's 15 more Gretchen than you and I painted. Wow.
That's right. It's a lot of Gretchen. I have 120. I can't keep up with these wild orc builds these days with their, what they call grot carpets.
This is very. I was going to say this is very similar to Eric Lathoris's Gant carpet, but with better shooting in combat.
Yeah. I mean, if you can run it, and I don't know how long the round times were here, but WTC round times are 4 hours, so you can do stuff like this if you choose. Anyone else want to run down a list? We've got Chaos. I'm not too knowledgeable on the dark powers.
Yeah, Paul. So I was just asking about this. Looking at a battalion of Emperor's Children with Noise Marines. We've got a battalion of the Alpha Legion with 20 Possessed and 3 Obliterators, and then Demon Battalion with 2 Poxringers and 3 Units of Nurglings. And Paul had to remind me what Noise Marines did. It's Strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage, but they're 3 shots each with all the chaosy ways to get +1 to wound and +1 to hit. and exploding sixes and all that. It's just a lot of shots coming out of those guys.
They're basically like a vehicle for stratagems, so that he doesn't have them in the quantity maybe that because you can have big fat units of these. You can have I think up to 20 of them in a squad. Now it does get very point intensive, so yeah, it leaves some holes in your list potentially. But you get to put in the stratagem that lets them fire twice. Of course, everything is a vehicle for veterans of the Long War to get those bonuses in combat, so they can be quite killy. And he's got the Blastmaster on these, which is the heavy version, a strength 8 D3 shots, or an assault D6 version.
It's almost even better than he's got the obliterators in here as well. So you have multiple ways to split. You don't have to dump everything into one unit, and of course, you got the big fat unit possessed.
That's layered. People can cage up, to how do they get around the obliterators, or how do they go forward and mess with your noise marines. It's not very good choices for your opponent.
What do you guys make of the little battalion at the end here? This little dollop of Nurgle. You got 2 Poxbringers and 9 Nurglings.
So those are going to be for powers. He's got the Mark of Nurgle on the possessed, so he can cast the Nurgle powers on him of Miasma of Pestilence for -1 to hit. And then he could also cast Blades of Putrefaction, I think, on them for a +1 to wound, I think.
He's also got Virulent Blessing on one of them as well.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll have to look up exactly what the Virulent Blessing does, but this is like a triple threat. The Noise Marines give you some nice backfield support. Their weapons, they can move and fire, right? But they're mostly 24-inch, or give them a 30-inch threat range. But then you've got these possessed that are, stack up all these minuses to hit. Like, what do you shoot at? What do you try to shoot at? You have to whittle down the possessed. They're not attracted to shoot at. And then you've got things coming in all around the board, like in the form of the obliterators that are with a little bit of favorable rolling, could collapse a flank all by themselves.
Yeah, even hiding one of these units with the Alpha Legion stratagem that you can't shoot, it gives it the character protection, but it doesn't matter which one he uses it on. You don't have enough shots usually to take care of the rest of these threats.
Agreed. The match possession, they're kicking up some defensive powers. Also, it's a tough nut to crack. Right. Chaos is a solid contender of things. We even saw that play out at the LVO with them trying to crack their way into the top 8. With several different pilots.
Shout out TJ Lanigan.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations to where I think they're outclassed in some of the higher caliber codexes, but only just barely. And in a team environment, they can really thrive, and I think that's probably part of the success here.
Yeah, absolutely. Team environments are a lot of fun, just because you can get rid of worst matchups, and sometimes your role is just not to lose too badly. If you get one of those bad matchups, if you can grind out a few points, that can save your team. That can turn a loss into a draw, or a draw into a win. So,
and for 54 points, what is this? 164 points or whatever of just value out of the Nurglings, that they just do so many things for you. They do a little bit of screening. They do a little bit of what is the reach out and touch somebody, a little hugging of things sometimes, and they help give you some CPs and really unlock give you an easy way to unlock some of these powers.
Yeah, absolutely. So by the way, we didn't say it, I don't think, at any point, but that was James McKenzie's list. Who's recently been on the show, I do believe. Just about everyone we've talked to so far has been on the show at some point, except for perhaps our next guy on the England Lions, Simon Prittis, one of the few people to ever refuse an interview on this show. Hey,
you want me to ask him for you, Val?
No, it's quite all right. We won't be calling again. The list that he's running is kind of what Tal looked like before Richard Siegler showed up. We got 3 Riptides, we got a Cold Star Commander, we've got some shield drones, but not all of the shield drones. We've got what, 14?
24 it looks like, if you include the gun drones on the Piranhas.
There you go. Well, okay, true, because there's 5 Piranhas. And then we've got a commander in a Cold Star battle suit and an ethereal in that old school Vanguard Sept detachment so that you can get the reroll and marker lights. So this one, I mean, I don't know how it stands up these days. This is one of his special chestnuts. I'm fairly certain he either won a grand tournament with this list. I'm pretty sure he was the Piranha guy. There was someone who won like a GT Heat or a grand tournament with a Piranha screen, basically. So perhaps that's him. What do you guys think? Do you guys know much about the Mighty Piranha, one of my favorite models in the Tau line?
No.
No?
I've never faced them ever.
No, that's correct. Because, you never see them. They've come down in points in basically every single chapter approved, and they still don't really get on the table. They're just sort of a fast skimmer-type vehicle. They travel in packs, so they don't separate, so they're always victims of morale. Helps to have an ethereal nearby for them. They're interesting. They're like a good flying screen as far as Tau is concerned, except for shield drones. So, I'm sure Simon knows how to make it work.
Well, this is actually almost brilliant just because he has only 4 things that a combat army could grab onto. I can see why this works really, really well. It's not a lot of drones, like we said, but with the Piranhas there and the Riptides, you literally only have 4 targets that are characters to grab onto.
Yeah.
I would put this up against Tyranids in a heartbeat, any kind of foot slogging force that's going to take a while to get up the board.
This would pair well into
choice
orcs.
with saying you'll take on the Tyranids.
Well, not John Lennon's Tyranids.
Well, that's a different story. That's a different story altogether.
That is also something that's a good point. Is a lot of WTC style lists are going to have very big horde elements, this team included. So those Piranhas are kicking out a tremendous amount of shots. They've got 2 gun drones on them, plus a heavy burst. Plus a burst cannon, not a heavy burst cannon. So that unit itself is going to be putting in a lot of anti-infantry shots downfield, but probably there just as a screen in front of the main army when I've seen this deployed on the table.
What I don't like here is there's only 5 command points. I mean, there's really not a lot of things beefing up anyway to influences. So, once your command point burn or whatever doesn't even get you through a command point reroll for every turn of the game, much less being able to spread them out across a couple of phases. So you've really got to exist off of the strength of your army, and right now I think a lot of other armies could out trick you with their spin.
That might change now that Psychic Awakening's around, but Tau, I think that's something that people were hip to a while ago. That the liability of bringing up a lot of fire warriors or crude or whatever you got to do to fill out battalions is not really worth the CP with what they have available to them. That changes now. That changes significantly because there's lots of cool stuff they want to spend CP on now. But, there were some things out of the gates with Tau that were, highly touted. But I think in the final analysis, the Army's more efficient just focusing on marker lights and the shooting it's got.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to explicitly armchair quarterback. I just know that I think you're going to want some command points along the way. And in the later rounds, especially if the tournament is designed to go later, that's an interesting choice that you would specifically not have them or not position yourselves to have them.
For sure. All right. Are we allowed to move on to Marcus Hinson, guys?
Hey, you're the boss.
All right. Really? Oh, Pete's not here. Okay, so trigger warning. Okay, so we've got Marcus Hinson. He's running Imperial Fists. Isn't that interesting?
This is beautiful. This is the first time we've seen this in all of 8th. Yes, a unit of 5 tactical marines with just bolters.
I didn't even see that. Look at that. That's interesting. This is the first moment where I've actually really wanted to know why.
Maybe you had 5 points to spare.
I think that's exactly what it was.
I mean, there is some value in the extra armor there. I mean, for only 5 points. I mean, you got to think. Imagine this? Like when you're building your army list, think about it. If you had a unit and you could spend 5 more points on it, would you give it a +1 armor save? Sometimes the answer is yes.
I don't know, but I mean that's against 5 bolter scouts who can infiltrate deploy. I don't know if it's worth.
No, you should never do that when you're against with scouts. But I mean, that's an option to take.
Yep, it's certainly an option. There are lots of options out there. This is the most interesting thing about this list to me. This is an Imperial Imperial Fist list. It's got some Thunderfire cannons and eliminators and some suppressors and other chestnuts, but it's flyer spam, guys. We got 3 Storm Talon gunships and 2 Stormhawk interceptors and an air wing detachment here. There's I guess 1 battalion, so lower on the command points, but Imperial Fists, Air Force. I don't think I've ever seen this combo. What do you think they're going for with it?
I dig it. The planes are just so deadly. They put out so much firepower and damage, essentially, and there's multiple guns on every one. So you're looking at, for the point value, the number of things that you can threaten with each of these is pretty good. And you get the durability of being a Marine, and then you get the also the extra dependability of being able to get a lot of work done in the Devastator Doctrine. So right as the game kicks off.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, these are just always going to be better as Iron Hands because they're re-rolling ones and they don't suffer a penalty for moving and shooting. However, I did notice here he's got a captain on bike. How's that? Did the captain on bike somehow survive Legends?
Yes. Captain on the Bike is in the Codex.
Oh, wow.
That is, yeah. I use this in my list when I play regular Marines as a target for the Burning Blade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mostly what I was thinking is they don't really care about moving and shooting because the bike can hopefully keep up with them and give them that sweet visual bubble.
Master, that's what you do. You make him a chapter master and you scoot him along with them so they can the flyers can move. He can advance and then he's able to push his aura out to the planes.
Yeah.
And keep up with him. So in that first couple of turns of the game, it's just you're re-rolling a lot. You're hitting. The Storm Talons are hitting ground targets on 2s. The Storm Hawks are hitting aerial targets on 2s. You're re-rolling. It's just reliable, mess you up stuff.
Cool. All right, and then the final list of the champion Lions. We've got Conrad Bart Kiewitz, I believe is his full name, but he's just Conrad Barton, Tourney Keeper. Here he is running some Eldari. It's some... Oh, okay. So we got a Death Jester, Shadow Seer, Solitaire, 5, looks like 10, 12 Skyweavers, and then a detachment of Craft Worlds with Headstrong and Hunters of Ancient Relics. I'm going to allow my co-host to quickly figure out what the hell those do. And we got a Farseer Skyrunner, a Warlock Skyrunner, and Shining Spears. 2 big units of Shining Spears. Actually, not even that big. Just 2 units of 6, and then a Supreme Command with some Ynnari characters. This is a lot of Eldar jank here, well over my head. Do we have any Eldar
Harlequins
fans?
they're B tier, right on the cusp of being great. They were great last year this time.
I don't know if they've ever been great.
When you
they were
things
handy. They were handy in the night meta. Yeah,
Drukhari, Harlequins and Drukhari things. With the grotesque. That's 8 months ago meta type stuff. But the Haywire and the things you can do with the Harlequins still have a place, and I think that puts them solidly in that B tier thing, just waiting for a little bit of a bubble up.
Yeah, this is very Sean Naden-esque with the amount of just Eldar bikes you have flying around. So we looked it up. Headstrong and Hunter of Ancient Relics. Headstrong is add 1 to charge rolls, and Hunters of Ancient Relics is add all models within 3 inches of an objective, add 1 to their attack characteristic. So he's going out and grabbing your objectives from you. He's going out and just hitting you, surrounding you with bikes. He's got the Haywire that can take care of vehicles if it needs to. This is a very hit and run type of list.
And the Solitaire is basically like a heat-seeking missile of character destruction. And it can basically kill most things, really, but specifically really good at killing characters.
I didn't even shout out the fact that I said some Ynnari characters. It's not really just the Incarns in here.
Oh, yeah. So he's probably doing that stratagem where he can put the Death Jester, the Solitaire, into your deployment zone. You shoot one of those characters. Surprise, it's the Incarn.
That's all. You have to have all 3 of the characters there. And they all move over there, and they got to be within 6 inches of each other. And yes, that's what happens. You throw them over there, somebody gets killed, and then it's like, well, now you got to deal with this guy.
How do you guys interpret what this strategy might be for throwing out these lists? Who do you think you're leading off with on this one?
You're put out not caring what happens.
Yeah.
The orcs all day long.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think the orcs sometimes can be intimidating as far as like you don't get enough damage done, and then they're still everywhere. Or their shock attack guns go crazy. You don't necessarily want to line up anything with a power piece or a power singular unit against that many shock attack guns.
I think they've been championing this over on the Art of War a lot. The fact that these kind of extreme body lists are just absolute meta counters because everybody's teching as Marines taking Stalker Bolt rifles, or for Marines trying to get through intercessor wounds. You don't necessarily need volume of fire, you need quality fire. And so when you don't have the volume and somebody drops 200 some odd bodies on you, what are you going to do?
Yeah, your 2 damage bolt rifles don't do crap against 75 grots.
Yeah, orcs I could see definitely being a lead off. Also, that gives them the chance potentially of grabbing a table that favors them a little bit, because they'll need something to take the blunt off of. Like, I mean, even on this team, there are lists that could, take a big bite out of that many orcs for sure. So yeah, but you're right. I mean, even just whittling down, a couple of those big boys units is going to take some effort. And he can just sort of use board control and try and outwit and outlast the opponent, and doesn't necessarily need to get a 20-0. He just needs to hang in there.
And Space Marines are also a solid choice. I mean, you can't. They can always find a way to be successful.
Also, yes.
All right, guys. Any other thoughts about the Belgian team championships? I just actually pulled up Tom Higginbottom's scores, and he got blanked, a 20-0, 15-0, a 20-0, and a 13-point. It's not a 15-0. It would be a 15-5 and a 13-7. But there you go. He had definitely a good run and was getting points, whatever position he was playing.
Also like to point out the fact that my boy Josh Roberts with the Grey Knights went undefeated.
Yeah. I think that's less of a story these days, but also Josh Roberts is cool, so don't mind shouting him out.
Hey, don't downplay. A lot of these Grey Knight players are coming out. They're getting their army off the shelf, which is, there's a lot of reward in that.
Hey,
yeah, they've been the joke literally the entirety of 8th.
And 7th.
They can have this one.
And 7th. And 6th. It's basically been since 5th. I didn't even know that stuff then. Anyway, let's hit this bump and then maybe segue seamlessly into another formerly downtrodden faction.
Tournament news.
Hi, I'm Chris from Canhammer, and you're listening to 40K Stat Center.
Okay, folks, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It's the reason Peter the Falcon took the week off. We are swinging over to Genghis Khan. Do you see what they did there? That's right, it's a Warhammer tournament taking place in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. It's Get Mile High. It's wacky. It's wonderful. It's Dark Angels won a GT.
Where is Ricky Addington and Adam Camilleri when you need him?
So let's have some hot takes from the floor here. Now, granted, this was a smaller GT. Peter tried to downplay it. He poo-pooed the level of competition. He talked some smack about it, and then he decided not to show up this week because he is so disturbed by the rise of Dark Angels to the top table. But how does that strike you guys? Because we were just talking about poor old Grey Knights, who, by the way, finished second at this tournament. What is happening, folks? We were just talking about the rise of Grey Knights. What about the rise of Dark Angels?
Turns out flyers are good.
Remember when we talked about like seeing Bigfoot in Australia?
No, but what? Dang, you remember seeing Bigfoot in Australia? That's gonna be a soundbite forever.
I don't. Okay, maybe Psychic Awakening gave him a lot. I mean, there are. I know people. The Dark Angel players have been excited about some of the tricks, and maybe they paid off. But I think this has to be operating on the back of the strength of the flyers. That's just sometimes they do work.
Yeah, I'm gonna bet the doctrines are helping as well.
Okay, so
good point. Yep, very good point.
Yeah, doctrines kick in for sure. All right, guys, the spoiler alert. We actually got Ben Neal, the champion of Genghis Khan. I got some clips from him, so we're going to get some first-hand accounts. He's going to walk us through how his list operated, and then we're going to talk about it. So before we do that, I'm going to do an old school list reveal here because it's special. Okay, Dark Angels won a GT. I don't think this has happened in 8th. I'm just going to throw that out there. Am I wrong about that?
I don't.
Maybe
I don't
when
think
Nephilim,
so.
maybe when the Jet Fighter was really strong, they won.
I
Early
think
on
they
in 8th,
won
they were very good.
I think they've won some games. I don't think they've ever taken the podium before. So this isn't very impressive.
Historic Ben Neal. Oh, and by the way, Ben Neal, folks, you might recognize that name. You know why? Because he ran perhaps the most lulzy Iron Hands list ever. He ran the Invincible Excelsior and won a GT around Colorado right when Iron Hands dropped. So, anywho, thought that was funny. So why don't we run down this list? He's got an Air Wing detachment with 3 Raven Wing Dark Talons. He's got another Air Wing detachment with 3 Nephilim Jet Fighters. So that's not too shabby already. And then we got a Spearhead detachment, Dark Angels. We got a Raven Wing Talon Master. Those are good. Samael and in Sable Claw, also good. We've got Elite in the Elite slot. We've got 2 Invictor Tactical Warsuits with Iron Hail. No.
Best unit we've seen, best data slate on the service level we've seen in forever.
Oh wow, that is high praise. It's got the Insidium. It's got the Flamers. Okay, guys, that's what I've been trying to say for like 2 minutes. And then under Fast Attack, we got a Ravenwing Dark Shroud, and in heavy support, 3 Eliminator squads because everyone needs 3 units of Eliminators, right?
Yes.
All right. So why don't I kick it over to Ben Neal now, and he's going to run us through some of his experiences at Genghis Khan.
Peter, I've really heard that you hate Dark Angels, but I know you love the last list I talked about on the show. So I'm hoping that this next one can really bring you over to the side of the totally not Chaos Space Marines. Don't worry about it. Certainly Ravenwing, I think, is the most viable way to play Dark Angels coming out. I did toy around with a combined list for a little bit using a big Deathwing Night Bomb that would deep strike 6 inches away with the stratagem for the bikers in addition to the 6 planes, but I was really missing the Eliminators and the Invictors in that list, so this is what I ended up taking to the event, and the Eliminators performed exceptionally well, as did the Invictors, as really good midfield presence that is just great for a Dark Angels army. The Eliminators also really benefit from the Dark Angels chapter tactic and doctrine. The list has a massive alpha strike potential while also being able to deploy pretty defensively. Generally, my game plan was deploy way back in the corner, hide a lot of stuff out of line of sight like the Eliminators, if I could, the Invictors, keep the characters safe by hiding them either in the plane bubble or just behind the Eliminators. And then the 6 flyers back in the corner, out of range of a lot of the opponent's stuff in the Dark Shroud bubble if the opponent did have long range. And then really using their high movement to position, stay in the bubble of my rerolls, and the Talon Master buff for ignore cover and move and shoot with no penalty for heavy weapons with his Warlord trait. And then really just kiting the enemy and move blocking a lot with the flyers late game. The list has a lot of strong matchups. There's a ridiculous amount of firepower that comes out. It's throwing out around 140 strength 4, 5, and 6 shots that all hit on 2s rerolling, reroll 1s to wound, and ignore cover. So there's very high potential for horde killing. There's also a lot of AP-2 shots, in addition to the Rift Cannons and Las Cannons for anti-tank. The only really weak matchup, I would say, would be Imperial Fists, just because they're all getting +1 damage on their heavy weapons against vehicles, and a Chapter Master can really get around the -2 to hit.
Ben Neal, everybody, hero to Dark Angels across the world, talking about how he doesn't feel like there's a lot of bad matchups. I mean, this is your flyer heavy list. What do you guys think? What would you be hoping to be playing with when you saw this across the field from you?
Well, I bet that the Invictor Warsuits, again, I love those things. I think they probably caused a little bit of target confusion for his opponents.
Absolutely, especially with the flyers being -2 to hit off the jump. You're already disincentivized from trying to shoot them down. And then everything else is probably in hiding, and those are the only things you can see.
Yeah, you can play cat and mouse with those Invictors too. It doesn't necessarily need to bring them up in your grill and force that pressure. Yeah, I guess there's definitely some moves here. Although,
well, with the flyers, I mean, he's talking about how he has a lot of shots, especially a lot of things that can chew up things even in the Horde armies, or he does pretty well against elite base forces. That's good, but if you take your eye off the ball with those flyers, you've wasted time. Like they're going to be where a lot of the damage comes out, like we talked about in some of the other lists. And so if you do have something that makes your opponent think, let me divert a few shots to them, or maybe they fired a flyer, don't do as much damage as they think they should, then they change their course to start firing at the Invictor, you've basically dominated them in turn one.
Absolutely. He made mention to the chapter tactic and the doctrines of Dark Angels. I don't think he actually said what they were. Do you guys know off the top of your head what do Dark Angels actually do now?
Okay, so they have Grim Resolve, which lets them reroll all hit rolls of 1 for that unit whenever it shoots, as long as it did not move. However, they have their Chapter Master for that, so they're not worried about that. What they're really getting is the Relentless Hunt, which is while the Devastator Doctrine is active, the range characteristic of all heavy and rapid-fire weapons equipped on a Dark Angels unit is increased by 6 inches, and the range of all their assault and pistol weapons are increased by 3. So this allows them to play a better game of cat and mouse with those flyers like he was talking about. He can hang back a little bit. He doesn't have to use their full movement.
You know, your Hurricane Bolters on some of those things, they're gonna rapid fire a little further out, but also, like he was saying, for the eliminators specifically, that lets them touch things a little further away and incentivizes them never to leave Devastator Doctrine. Shocker, because we all know how Marines love that doctrine.
Eliminators are such they're cheap. You get a squad of 3 for 72 points or something close to that. Plus or minus a couple of points, and you can fire out a line of sight. And so if you get something that makes that better, like a doctrine or whatever, they're even more advantageous to take.
Yeah, Paul, you guys were just talking about this on Force Narrative, right? About how nobody likes characters at all, or having them, or buffs, or abilities, or of any kind.
Yeah, right. Well, some of the characters just aren't designed to withstand that type of firepower, and so if you can't prevent them from shooting you at all, I mean, be outside of just being outside of range, and then if you find a way to overcome what that range band increasing their threat might be, you got a leg up against a lot of the field out there.
Absolutely. And I just wanted, before we wrap up our Genghis Khan coverage, just shout out to Colin K, second place. Not sure exactly how his record broke out, but guess what he was running, guys?
Gray Knights.
Look out, and it was a double paladin experiment as well. This one, though, not double battalions. So maybe that's the difference, guys. You need more strikes. You need those battalions. But the story of this tournament, folks, again, Dark Angels bagged one in the Rocky Mountains. Folks, let's hit a bump for our last segment.
Well, let me, before we get off of this, if you don't mind.
I do mind, but go ahead.
Tyranids in third place.
I don't even know what third place is.
Well...
Yeah,
it's
Tyranids.
still walking away
Hydra.
with bronze. You still walk. I mean, that's a podium finish
with
Tyranids. I mean, this finish is like a throwback to.
It's not a good list, and he went 4-2, and the guys that beat him were the first 2.
Well, hey man, sometimes you just gotta back your way into third place, right? I mean, whatever gets you there.
Score points to scoring points.
I've gone 4-2 the hard way before, and
that's very true.
It's something.
Well, I mean, look, it's a something we don't often talk about, but somebody plays the guy that goes all the way.
That's right. So you know what, true. guy in third place, you have a name, and we're gonna say it, Matt Evans. Matt Evans, making Tyranid players around the world, except for Tony, proud of you. So now, if I have permission from the fellow Circle Jerkers to move on to the next Circle Jerk?
By all means.
All right, here we go.
Tournament news.
Hi, I'm Stephen Box from Vanguard Tactics, and you're listening to the one and only 40k Stat Center.
Thank you, Stephen. That's very kind. Now, to close out the show, we had a lot of tournaments last week, so we're going to do things a little bit differently. Because, oh, yeah, there we go. We hear a lot about the Iron Hands, and, sometimes the people out there, they're not as excited about Iron Hands as maybe we are. or the people who won the tournament. So let's just get some nice vibes going here, because Tony, out of all the tournaments last week, how many of them were won by Iron Hands?
8.
Jeez.
Out of 20.
Jeez Louise, that's 8 out of all of the top 4s, right?
Yeah, that's 40% of the top 4s.
40% of the top 4s were Iron Hands, so let's not besmirch these people, because obviously they're winning GTs. They're having good runs, so why don't we just give them some lovable shout-outs? And before we even get to that, Tony, of those, do you want to pick one? Did anyone have a unique flavor of Iron Fist?
No.
All right, then.
Are we talking about the character with the mystical punch, or are we
Well, I mean, whatever, however you want to interpret that. So why don't we just start running them down a little bit here? So we had Winter Warfare, actually not won by Iron Hands, but it was won by George White, who you might remember from early seasons of Tabletop Tactics. George White, if I recall correctly, ran 5... Actually, this is really funny. He ran 5 nights into, I believe, a 7th edition Iron Hands list, and lost so badly, he's never returned to the channel. He's back with Raven Guard. He won that. Boris Mitchev, who called his shot. He said he was going to win Winter Warfare last weekend with his Iron Hands.
Boris did ask us why we didn't reach out to him, but Boris, interviews are for closers.
That's right. And for weeks where I get my stuff together. Next, we have Echoes of War. Another tournament held last week. This one run and won by J. Seaburn with Iron Hands. Guys, what do you think about this list?
There's a Chaplain Venerable Dreadnought in it.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. We got some infiltrators.
And Farios.
We got a Farios.
Oh, look, and a Leviathan Dreadnought.
Oh, is there a Relic Leviathan? Get out.
There's a Relic Leviathan.
Oh, well, all right. You know what? Tip of the cap to you, Jay Seaburn, with your Iron Hands win. Way to go. Next up, we've got the Glasshammer GT. So we know that there's some quality competition here. The person who won with Iron Hands at this tournament actually probably had to beat a lot of Iron Hands to do it. So let's not, again, besmirch the one, the only, once upon a time, UK's finest 40K player, Mike Porter, with a big win at the Glasshammer GT.
I'm going to pretend this is chaos so I can keep my sanity. Good job, Mike Porter, with winning with chaos.
Way to go, Alpha Legion.
Rounding out the Iron Handies from last weekend, we've got Daniel Hesters. His friends call him Danny. And he also won with Iron Hands at the Dice Head GT. And you know who else podiumed with Iron Hands at the Dice Head GT? We had Uncle Bobby and Davis Messer. I don't know why I'm mentioning them, but they all ran Iron Hands. But you know who didn't? Ryan Snyder in 3rd place, guys. He was running a giant Custodes airplane.
And all of the grav in existence.
That comes in handy. I'm just looking at Daniel Hesters just so everyone knows. He ran a Relic Leviathan Dreadnought. But he mixed in 3 Stormhawk Interceptors. So he's a bit of a snowflake. All right, sounds like the segment's over, everybody. And you know what? I think this vibe is just treating me so well. I think we're gonna use it to close out the show. We've hit up all of the Iron Hand winners. There may have been a couple from the week before, but it's okay.
Look, let me jump in for just a second here if I can.
Please, take the mic.
It's been raining in Georgia for, I don't know, what seems like ever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no sunshine in my life right now.
Oh.
Except what we just talked about. Like we did talk about a lot of Iron Hands victories, but in some of these more other notable tournaments, we talked about some factions being out there in the world.
Heck yeah.
I don't know if it's enough to rival them, but you have to expect that some of these people had to beat their way through Iron Hands players.
You know, maybe there's a brighter meta in the future. We've got Orcs getting rules next week. We're gonna start seeing the new face of Tau. Maybe the hegemony of the Space Marine meta is coming to an end, and we don't even know what might be coming our way later on in 2020. So, hey. You know what's coming your way, folks, or has already come this week, is a bunch of great content from the Frontline Gaming Network of podcasts. You had me hosting Chapter Tactics just earlier this week. Reese and Pablo were rocking it out on Signals from the Frontline, and on Art of War there was somebody whose name I can't quite remember, but next week is Lawrence Baker. Before we sign off, is there anything that you fellas would like to add?
Thanks for having me. I've had a great time.
It was great again, guys. Thanks for having me.
That was just as riveting as what Pete usually says.
Bye-bye.
This has been 40K Stat Center, a presentation of the Frontline Gaming Podcast Network. Like what we do? Subscribe to and rate us on YouTube and wherever podcasts can be found. Join the conversation. Follow 40K Stat Center on Facebook. You can also support the show directly by joining the Chapter Tactics Patreon and competitive 40K in general via the ITC Patreon or by grabbing a subscription to BCP.